We're happy to have Chaim Einhorn, veteran Hatzalah paramedic, lives in Flatbush, and has spent many, many summers upstate. Thank you very much, Chaim, for coming. And we'll talk a little bit about safety, trying to get important messages out to the community, to the members as they're getting ready to come up for the summer season. And we'd like to hear what your perspective, and from so many years of responding to Hatzalah calls, I'm sure you've seen your share of tragedies, terrible accidents, and injuries that probably could have been prevented. Chaim.
Yeah, appreciate it, Yidel. So my name is Chaim Einhorn. I'm a paramedic. I'm from Flatbush. Been going up to the Catskills for close to 20 years now. I'm a paramedic since 2010. And been very active in the Catskills and in Flatbush as well. One of the things that always comes to mind is the type, and Yidel, you can attest to this, is the type of accidents that we experience in the Catskills versus what we experience, say, in the city.
Sure, the Catskills is high speed. Everybody's driving fast. Those roads are...
Greater rate of fatalities, more serious injuries. And when you're driving on a road that curves, that doesn't have guardrails, that maybe isn't as maintained as it should, or you're pretending that you're in the city, dropping people off on the side of the road, stopping, pulling over, say on the 42, which has a 55 mile an hour speed limit.
And people don't drive the speed limit.
And people don't drive the speed limit. The velocity of these accidents, just a pure mechanism of injury, creates very serious, traumatic medical cases. And people often suffer lifetime of injuries, of pain, because of these sort of accidents.
Any memorable accidents that really come to your mind that you think were like horrific injuries that probably could have been prevented? And what do you think, the message would be? I'm sure it brings to memory some of these bad accidents that you've seen. And what do you think would have been the contributing factor, if you would have to guess, a habit, a behavior that can be changed, that can prevent these things?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, and I speak on behalf of all my fellow paramedics who have taken calls on the Catskills. Unfortunately, almost everyone that I know has seen their share of tragic accidents. And it's far too common. It happens far too often. And many of it can be prevented. Me specifically, I remember many, many years ago, I was just starting out. There were 6 kids that had a car, young kids, ages 18 through 12 or 11, around that age. They were speeding on the 17B. They crossed over at a turn. They went past the yellow line. They hit a dump truck head on.
I remember that one.
Yeah, and they all 6 died right on the scene. It was a horrific incident, a horrific tragedy. And what comes to mind, and not to point fingers, things can happen, but speed and experience. Driving upstate is very different than driving in the city. Someone who's born and raised upstate has a certain mentality, whether we like it or not. And us city people, like they say, we have our own mentality, and we drive different. We park our cars different. By way of example, take someone who lives upstate all year, all their life, bring them into Borough Park, Flatbush, and ask them to parallel park.
It's not going to work.
It's not going to work. So there's certain skill sets they have, and then there are natural skill sets, and there's certain skill sets people from the city have. And it sounds like theatrics, like we're being dramatic, but ask any Hatzalah paramedic who's been upstate in the Catskills and who's taken calls up there. Their most traumatic calls, the most serious incidents that have occurred that they can remember, almost in all cases, lead back to calls in the Catskills. And it's very unfortunate.
It's, the driving high speed in general. It's not city streets where speed limit is 25, and if you're going 35, that's already way over the speed limit.
Right.
Upstate, the speed limit is 55. And if you're driving 10, 15, 20 above the speed limit, especially on these narrow roads, they're unforgiving.
Yeah, and you don't have time to respond either. People are texting on the phone all the time in the city. It's a fact. I'm not condoning it. I'm not saying it's okay. But there's more of a reactionary time that you have when you're in the city to respond quickly and hit your brakes. Not that it's okay. It's very different. When you're driving 55 miles an hour and a deer runs out in front of you, and you're on your phone, you're not looking, that's the difference between life and death. And so there's a lot of different factors, and we have to face it, that we're not drivers that are experienced to drive up there.
It seems to come back a lot to speed.
I think speed is one of the biggest issues.
Yeah, and if only we would slow down, we have more time to react and, bigger chance of preventing that accident.
Yeah, I agree with that. And speed is a very big component of it.
But we also see. I've seen it myself. People try to pass cars that they feel are driving too slow for them because they're just driving the speed limit, and then sometimes out of the blue, you're driving, you see someone out of the corner of your eye on the left side. He's just passing you, passing 2, 3, 4 cars, driving 80, 90 miles an hour. You can't see. There are hills, there are curves, and crossing that double yellow line and passing cars at high speed is a disaster waiting to happen.
In fact, actually, it's a disaster that has happened. We've both been to many of those calls, those crossing double yellow line calls. So to your point, it's a very serious issue. And the amount of time it takes to overcome a car when there's a car coming at you, 55, 65, the car in front coming at you could be even speeding. It's so quick. You can't do anything. So you either hit the brakes, you try to get back into the lane, you try to go to the left, to the right, the car in front stops. We've seen all sorts of different scenarios. I can write a book about all the different types of accidents we've seen just in that particular scenario.
What do you say to these electric scooters, Segways, the golf carts? It's become very popular, and everybody has them, it seems. I personally, I never let my kids use them. I never bought them for my kids. But the kids want them, the kids are getting them. And what have you seen? What's your experience that you've seen from the use of these toys?
I personally haven't gotten scooters for my kids either. My kid's looking at me through the glass window right there laughing. And the reason for that is, just like you said, they're dangerous. They're very dangerous. I'm not here to tell people what they should do, what personal choices they should make, what's appropriate for them in their circumstance. So whether they decide to get one or not, that I can't tell you. I can't tell them what to do. However, there's a couple of things that I will say. Be aware that these things have engines. People think that a scooter, because it's quiet, it's battery operated, it's not so dangerous. It doesn't have a loud noise. There's no muffler. They think this is not like a motorcycle or a bike.
A false perception that it's quiet, silent.
Right. False sense of security. Kids who are on these scooters have a false sense of security, even with the helmets. And even the helmets itself. They're wearing flimsy helmets. They're speeding on these scooters. I don't think it's a day, you tell me actually. Has there been a day in the Catskills this past summer season, where there hasn't been a call where a child fell off one of these scooters?
We have multiple calls of these probably every day, of kids
Each day,
falling
right?
off. That's most common calls. We have kids falling off these scooters and segways, even bicycles, electric scooters, even not the electric scooters.
Right.
You know, the country is known to have hills. Every bungalow colony has its hills, and the kids love to speed down those hills. And, you know, when that happens and either they fall off or they hit a tree or even another child, it can cause serious injuries. Even if we're not talking about head injuries, the nasty broken arms and legs that we see,
Angulated fractures.
and many times those need surgery. And these are things that, you know, these people end up having a lifetime of suffering. They remember that injury for the rest of their lives. Every time the weather's bad, they feel it. They feel it in, you know, that broken arm that was broken, that leg, or chas v'shalom, a bad ankle fracture that needs surgery. It's a long recovery, and it came from one foolish moment, one moment of carelessness. Or I personally have seen, you know, calls where we get to, and you have, you know, this father trying to get on his kid's Segway. You get a father that didn't take a ride on a bicycle for 20 years, and now he decides to try a Segway, and most cases it doesn't work well, it doesn't end up well, and like I said, if they're lucky, it's only a broken leg or a broken arm, chas v'shalom, and those are bad fractures that they deal with for a long time. So you're right. These are not toys to be taken lightly. And if only people would just, you know, think before they use these toys, at least make sure you know what you're doing. Your kid was trained to use it, at least, you know, following the manufacturer's guidelines, and always using a helmet that's, you know, fit right, and a helmet that's an approved helmet. You know, make sure it's a good helmet, especially when you're driving these high-speed scooters and segways. I remember an accident where a kid was actually run over by a car near the head, and the helmet actually was cracked, had serious damage, but the kid survived. So I don't even want to think for a second what chas v'shalom would have happened had that kid not been wearing a helmet. So, I mean, I think this is, the message is very clear, very simple. Make sure the kid wear the helmet.
Yeah.
If the kid's not going to wear the helmet, do not let them ride that bicycle or any of those other scooters. And I think there needs to be a zero tolerance from the parents.
Yeah, I know many colonies and developments, they have policies against scooters and things like that. But when you think of a scooter, one other thing to think about is a child or an adult is standing, they're high, and they're going 25 miles an hour. If you saw someone drive a motorcycle without a helmet, sitting, driving somewhere, you would look at them, why are you not wearing a helmet? But the velocity of the injury, the mechanism of injury, is the same. It doesn't matter what type of vehicle, so to speak, they were driving. And so if they choose to drive or use a scooter, a helmet should be worn. And I'll add, and Yidel, I think you would agree, that this goes for non-mechanical scooters as well. Kids oftentimes go downhill. They go to the top of the hill. They kind of give it a little push. They love it, exactly. It's a lot of fun. And they flip over. They hit their head. And everyone thinks, look, I'm going to hit my hand, I'm going to hit my foot, stretch out my arm, protect myself. What are the odds I'm going to hit the head? When you fall, especially with a child, most heaviest part of their body, the upper body, is their head. What ends up happening is the first thing that hits the ground is their head. Especially if there's high speed, they don't have enough time to put their arm out.
And then they need to call for paramedics like you and maybe a helicopter
Unfortunately. Yeah.
to get them to a trauma center.
Yeah.
With, as we know, we've seen serious head injuries, skull fractures, with days in the ICU. So, yeah, hopefully that people will listen to the message and they'll listen to our advice.
Yeah. I'll also add one more thing just when it comes to driving. We're talking about driving specifically. And that relates to making K-turns or U-turns, especially coming out of or onto main roads. The reality is we misjudge how fast cars are coming at us. It's impossible to judge. Humans are not capable of judging that. And so you see a car coming up, it's a busy Friday, you got to go where you got to go, and you're coming out of your colony, your development, your unit, whatever, you're going on to whatever highway, whatever road, and you just you try to floor it, just rip off and assume you're not going to get hit. Oftentimes you don't, but
K-turns are good, in the city.
They don't work.
Speed limit is 25 miles an hour. But upstate, some cars are still coming down. Even officially, it's only 30 miles an hour because you're coming into the towns where in town speed limit is, slower. Probably only 30 miles an hour, but we all see cars still coming down 50, 55 miles an hour. And you try to make a K-turn. We've seen so many of these accidents. Never make a U-turn or a K-turn on a highway upstate. And a highway doesn't mean the 17. Route 55, the 42, the 52, or any of the other roads that cars are traveling high speed. If you need to turn around, pull into a driveway, and then make an exit, a safe exit. Never, ever make that U-turn in middle of these roads. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, pulling over on the side of those roads too, same thing.
Stopping to, be nice to give a hitch on a road that's a 55 mile an hour zone. You have a big dump truck coming down that road.
They can't stop.
No way they're going to stop.
Slam right into the car. And that happens all the time.
So you're trying to do someone a favor by giving them a ride, and you're not helping anyone. You're putting your life in danger and everyone else around you.
Yeah.
Chaim, you are very involved with our search and rescue team. And you put in a lot of time and a lot of training. And any tips, any important safety concerns that you specifically can say are related to hiking, going out in the outdoors, in the woods, whether it's, these popular state forests, or even just in the back of the bungalow colony, back of the camp, going out for a little hike. What do you see to be the most prevalent issues that people should be aware of?
There are two things that people need to be aware of. Number one is never underestimate the outdoors. Going out onto even a trail comes with its own set of dangers. The rocks could be slippery. There could be trails that go up steep hills that you're not prepared for, mentally, physically. The trails can get thinner and thinner as you get deeper and deeper into the woods. And people misjudge how far they've gone or how far they should go or until when they should go.
When they should start turning around.
Until yeah, exactly. And so I would say when someone decides to go out on a hike, let's talk about Minnewaska State Park or one of the other state parks, Sam's Point or Neversink or whatever it is. First thing is make sure they're wearing the right proper gear. Make sure they're wearing shoes that work.
Not flimsy sneakers or
flip-flops or Shabbos shoes.
Or Crocs.
It'll get you to a certain point, but once the trail starts getting smaller and smaller and the terrain gets rougher and rougher, you're going to slip.
From what I understand, the markings on these trails are also not for inexperienced people. It's not so clear to read these markings, the colors, the directions,
Yeah.
and it's very easy to get lost. I don't think anyone that doesn't have experience in hiking should start out on some rough trails the first time.
Preparedness is key. And to your point, Yidel, when it comes to hiking on a trail, you have to know what trail you're staying on, what the color, usually the trails are color coded. They'll usually tell you how difficult it is. You can go online and check. Or oftentimes, right when you walk in, there's a little map, you can look. But a couple of mistakes that people make is they're walking down the trail and they assume there's a split, or they don't realize there's a split, and they take another trail, and that trail can take them 10 miles somewhere off in the distance, and they have no idea where they are. They lose cell phone service, they lose reception, it gets dark. And so those things need to be considered. The other thing is always have enough water with you. Water is key. Hydration. You can survive with water
For a while.
for quite some time. And we're talking about nature, the bugs and the sun in the woods. Sometimes you don't have the sun, but the bugs will get you. You can, if you're allergic to bee bites, take your EpiPen with you.
That can be life-threatening.
Yeah. We've had instances where people were out on the trails, hour and a half walk, and they went into anaphylactic reaction because a bee just came and tons of bees or whatever it was, and something hit them. Something bit them. So be prepared. Preparedness is key. When it comes to walking behind a colony or taking a walk in a wooded area that's not marked, it's highly, unless you know what you're doing, I advise not to do that. We very often have times where people get lost behind colonies, particularly in some of the rural areas, some of the more secluded, further out developments and so forth. And people underestimate how difficult it is to actually walk out there and to maintain a position of where you are. You assume I'm only 500 feet or 100 feet. You look to the right, you look to the left. You don't even know where you are anymore.
You don't have any landmarks, and you can just be going around in circles for a whole day.
Yeah.
And not find your way back.
Yeah.
So even on the marked trails, you need to be very careful, especially when there are no trails and you don't know the terrain, you don't know the area. Definitely not worth the chance.
Yeah.
But from my experience, the common theme seems to be when getting lost, there always seems to be a party that went out of, let's say, a group of 10, 15, and one or two either somehow strayed from the pack, from the group, got separated, and now they're lost. The rest of the group makes it out, two are lost. So it seems to be pretty obvious that one of the most important things when you go out is just stay together. Don't veer off the path, or maybe they're just a little bit slower. So make sure that everyone from the group is always accounted for and everyone's really walking together, because it just seems every time, most of the times you get called out, there's a group of 10 went in, 8 came out, 9 came out, 1 or 2 are missing. So it seems that they're separating for whatever reason, and generally seems to become a problem.
And what also happens oftentimes is they get lost, and then they decide to split up. And now you have 2 lost parties, or one party that ends up finding their way out, and the other one that's lost. It's better to stay together, in general. It's better not to hike ahead. So if you have someone slow that's with you and they can't keep up, guess
together.
what? That's how you're going to be the entire hike.
Part of the group.
It's part of it. And they have to stay together. They can't separate. If they do get lost, the best thing to do is to typically stay in one place, provided that it's safe. If the phone works, they should call Hatzalah and 911, both. And 911 has their ways that they can try to find them. Hatzalah has their ways. But the best place to be is in the same place. If you are in danger, it depends where you are. If, for example, there's a flood warning or it's raining, you got to get shelter, then obviously you have to move to a safer spot. But generally speaking, the best place to stay is in the same place. Because what ends up happening is it becomes a game of cat and mouse. When they search for you, they cover a certain area, and then they say it's covered, and then you go right back into that area that was covered, and it ends up becoming a game of cat and mouse. So it's always best to stay in the same location.
They'd be searching for hours for something that could have been found in a half hour.
Correct. Usually best to stay in the same place, yeah.
How about injuries that we've encountered during hiking, and what do you think that may be attributed to, or anything that they can do differently when they're out hiking? Because, we've been called to injured hikers. Is there anything that we commonly see, that you have commonly seen, that you think people should be aware of?
Most common injury when hiking is a rolled ankle, which is basically where you lose your footing, either because a rock is loose or there's a rut, and you move your foot to the side involuntarily, and it can cause either a fracture or a sprain to the ankle, and the person then can't move or get up.
So I guess proper footwear, wearing the right
Proper
shoes.
footwear and watching, being very...
But it's hard to watch. You're walking out in the forest, you're going to encounter all these things.
Look, it's dangerous. At the end of the day, it's a dangerous activity. It's just part of it.
Definitely not a good idea to take little kids out on, these kind of hikes.
Yeah.
You go to a park with some playgrounds, that's where little kids should go.
Yeah.
Not to these parks. They're called parks, but they're really big forests.
They are. And some of them link up into trails that go across the state, something called a long trail. We've had cases where someone was hiking and they ended up on the long trail, which is the Appalachian Trail. It goes for, you can look it up, hundreds and hundreds of miles.
Wow.
And they just veered off somewhere and they're just walking and walking on this thing. And they have no clue where it's going, and they think eventually they're going to come back around. So preparedness, looking at the map quickly, understanding where you are, what your plan is very, very important.
How about biking? Just plain old-fashioned biking, whether it's on trails, they have trails for them, or are there any places that they shouldn't go out? We've had people also go out to some of these newer trails that supposedly are made for bikes, but it seems that some people get onto trails that are not really made for the bikes.
Yeah.
And, I think we've encountered plenty injuries and mishaps on, those trails too.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because your regular standard bike is not going to make it on the trail. There are special bikes. They call them mountain bikes, but the ones that we think of, the ones that are sold in Walmart, are not the real mountain bikes. But they're mountain bikes that are meant for trails. And if you take a regular bike, what they call a road bike, start driving on the trail, you're going to fall and hurt yourself.
Unless it's really a nice and comfortable, easy park made for just regular
Specifically for that,
bicycles.
if it's paved or something to that effect, then you'll be fine. But
if it's off-road,
don't
definitely
take
not
your
with a
regular bike.
bicycle.
Yeah, absolutely not.
How about, rivers, streams? You encounter those especially in the forest when you're going out hiking. Some of those streams may look a little bit innocent. Any advice that you can give about crossing those things?
Yeah. That's a very good, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's actually a very important topic, particularly in Sullivan County and Ulster County. We have the Delaware River as an example. The Delaware River, and this goes not only for the Delaware, I'm just using it as an example, but people don't know there are deaths in the Delaware River every summer, and a lot more than one, unfortunately. And the reason for that is it has this nice, tranquil look. You look at the river, it's beautiful. You figure, what could happen? Let me go in. I see the floor. I could see it right there. I could just walk in 2-3 feet. But what people don't know is that the way the geology, the way the ground is developed within these rivers, is there's oftentimes these crevasses or these cliffs that just appear out of nowhere
In the water.
within the water. And you're walking and you literally
Can drop.
in. And it's not like dropping into a little thing, a little stream. There's pressure because the water is rushing into this cliff underneath the water, and it sucks people in. The Delaware River is known for that. But there are other streams that are within Sullivan County, within our area, that have very similar characteristics.
I remember we responded to a drowning. It was actually a triple drowning in White Lake. I think 2-3 summers ago. 911 called us for help, but I remember that it was a family that came up somewhere from Long Island, and they stepped into the lake, into the water, and about 10, 15, or 20 feet from the shore, exactly that's what happened. The
just
floor
drops
just
off.
dropped right underneath them, and one drowned, a second tried to come and schlep this one out, and then the third, and they all drowned. And it was a horrific
Yeah.
scene. We were doing CPR on 3 patients after they were pulled out by divers after about 20 minutes or so. And unfortunately, 2 were transported to the hospital and were pronounced didn't survive. And the third one survived, but not more than for another few weeks because they'd been down for so long. And they weren't wearing life vests. But now that you mentioned this, it reminds me of another story. This was a number of years ago, maybe 7-8 years ago. A family went out to one of these famous parks, Sam's Point, or as some know it as Ice Cave Mountain. It's part of the Minnewaska State Park in Ulster County. The family went out, and there was like a little fence with a sign not to climb over the fence. And someone from the family stepped over to take a nice family picture. And as he was backing up to get the family to fit into the picture, he fell into like a crevice, a crack in the stone and the rock that dropped 60 feet. 1 minute he was here, and this is literally what the wife called Hatzalah, and she was screaming, my husband, I don't know what happened. I just saw him, and 1 minute later he just fell and I can't see him. When that call came out, I heard the call from the dispatcher. My heart skipped a few beats because I knew what that means. I know the park. We've been there for some searches. And that park is not right in this heart of the Catskills. It took us time to get there. And we were bracing for the worst. But Baruch Hashem, it was a tough rescue. They had professional rescue teams from Ulster County that came. Hatzalah was there. We assisted. He fell 60 feet. And he survived with a couple of broken bones, some facial fractures. But he, Baruch Hashem, survived miraculously. It was a nest that, I couldn't have thought and expect. We did not expect that, we're going to find someone that's actually going to be able to walk home from there. We ended up transporting him to a trauma center because they wanted to fly with a helicopter to get him to a trauma center, but the weather was bad. There were thunderstorms actually during the rescue. You can't imagine the fear, the pachad that this family had to endure for about 2 hours till he actually was lifted up by the special rescue team with ropes and a special basket stretcher, a dangerous rescue to begin with. So again, if there's a little, and in these parks, this is the wilderness. They're not building 8 feet walls, so that you shouldn't be able to
All you
climb
see is
over.
that little sign, and we think it's nothing.
It's a little sign. It looks like an innocent little sign. Danger. Trust me, that is as dangerous as it gets. This is basically standing on the roof of a
6-foot building.
6-story
Six-story building.
building without a fence.
Yeah.
And that's what all these parks are. They have drops of 100, sometimes 150 feet. So these are not, hikes to be taken lightly, especially when going out with children. You have to be very, very careful. Stay away from the edges of those trails. Some of these parks have little drops that drop 100, 200, 300 feet.
Yeah. And we experience those types of calls every summer in various different formats. And as much as we train and we work and try to really help these patients, at the end of the day, like you said, when someone's 60 feet off a cliff and you can't get to them, they're in a very bad spot. And it requires a lot of people, a lot of experts to really get that person out. And it's from one innocent mistake, overlooking one small sign that you felt doesn't apply to you. I'm not saying that happened in this case, but I'm trying to make a point to the public is you have to follow these signs.
Before I'm going to ask you the final question, it just came to mind, we always go out to these searches and, law enforcement gets involved, the state forest rangers, the park rangers come. And it's just something that I think people don't realize. A lot of these state parks, it's state land. There are rules as to when and how you can use the park. One of the things people don't realize, I think there's a restriction of how many people
there is.
are actually allowed to go into the park together as a group. Otherwise, you need to get a permit beforehand from the state park. And we've seen people get ticketed, and those are sometimes even, criminal tickets by the New York State DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation. And, upstate, they'll come and enforce that. So I think the message is to groups, bungalow colonies, day camps, and camps.
I think it's over 25, but they should check with whatever park they're looking at just to make sure. But I think it's any group over 25.
So it's part of the plan.
Yeah.
When you plan ahead, think about that permit.
Yeah.
Same thing is actually with fishing and boating in some of these in some of these parks. They have rules as to when you need to be out, when you can come in, and you can't. Many of these parks you can't take a boat, even if you have your own little canoe or something, or fishing. Generally, you need to get a permit beforehand.
Yeah, or even swimming. In some of these lakes, you can't just decide to take a swim.
And we've unfortunately had tragedies in some of these parks with big signs, no swimming.
Yeah.
Chaim, from all the years, you've seen so many, you've been to so many of these calls. Is there any message that, really talks to you that you'd want to relay? Is there any one specific message that you say really is something that would be on top of your list?
In terms of the public, the people
Public,
to be aware of?
either a careless or reckless type of behavior that you see, something that you see commonly, or a safety concern that you would say people should be aware of.
I would say the number one thing, the number one rule that you should remember, particularly upstate, is follow the rules. And I say that when it comes to speeding, when it comes to K-turns, when it comes to pulling out of your driveway in your bungalow colony onto the main road, when it comes to safety going into parks, we tend to underestimate what danger really lurks, particularly upstate. In the city, every little danger has a sign. If they don't want you to go somewhere, they put up a big fence. It doesn't work like that. Upstate doesn't work like that. It's a different environment. And
miles and hundreds of miles of roads, you can't just build fences all over.
So no speeding, no distracted driving, no K-turns, no U-turns. Don't pull over to the side of the road. Be cautious, especially when it rains. Leave space. Don't Go in the car behind you, leave space. We see rear end accidents all the time. And I don't think I can say this enough, but one of the unnecessary just calls we constantly have again is people not wearing helmets, scooters, accidents, and things like that, where parents look at these scooters as just a toy and don't realize the danger that they present. And letting a 8-year-old drive around with something that has an engine in it, just because it's battery operated doesn't mean it's different than an engine. It's really dangerous. And I think that people need to be very aware of that, because that's something that happens all the time.
Follow the rules.
Yeah, it's just as simple as that.
Follow the rules. Think safety.
Think safety. Everyone thinks it's not going to happen to them. We all think that.
Because the truth is, even with, following all the rules, we still don't know what the other driver is going to do.
Right.
So, we have to have a lot of siyata d'shmaya. Every time we head out on the road, we need to say a kapitel tehillim and daven that we should get there safely. Because even if, we follow all the rules, there's still others sharing the road that many times don't, as we see. But we're talking about this, I think there's one message that I don't think it was touched before, up until now. It's something that I see as a Hatzalah member responding to calls upstate. We're driving lights and sirens, and many of the roads, it's just one lane. And you're pulling up, behind the car, driving in front of you, and the message to someone driving upstate and an emergency vehicle pulls up behind you, what should you do?
Stop.
Now, don't slam your brakes, but we can encounter this many, many times. They think that, okay, he moves over to the side of the road like just a foot or two and expecting the Hatzalah member or the emergency vehicle to now cross him into oncoming traffic when there are big trucks coming across on the other side, opposite me. We have no room. There's no way we can do it. And he's still driving the same speed. So the message is, if you see an emergency vehicle behind you, lights and sirens, what should you do? Find the first spot, first signal. Put your blinker on so that the emergency vehicle behind you sees that you noticed he's coming behind you, and that you're intending to pull over. And don't just slow down a bit from 50 to 45. You should be pulling over where you have some room to pull over and stop so that we can pass you safely. Because, no Hatzalah member wants to put his life, chas v'shalom, in danger or oncoming traffic. And the only safe way to do that is if you give us enough room to pass you safely. And that is by completely moving off the road and stopping, if you can. If not, slow down to a crawl and really move off the road all the way as much as possible. Just by moving a foot or two to the right is not enough for us to pass you safely.
Yep. And people should also be aware of the laws related to emergency vehicles in general when they're pulled over. So if you're going down to 17, as an example, and you see a trooper.
The move over law.
The move over law. And the move over law doesn't only apply to when there's a state trooper pulling over someone because they were speeding. If there's an accident, you have to move all the way over to the side as much as possible.
And slow down.
And slow down by law. And that's something that's being enforced more and more because there are a lot of accidents that involve emergency vehicles, far too many.
I think we should add, while we're talking about it, if you do see an accident and you see Hatzulah's on the scene already, please just don't stop. Don't pull over. Especially, don't pull over, roll down your window in the middle of the highway. What's geschehen? What happened? That's another accident waiting to happen. Or the accident's on the 17, heading up to the mountains, and you're coming on the other side of on the other side of the highway, you're heading, and you're slowing down on a highway that trucks and cars are driving 65, 70 miles an hour because you want to see what's going on. You see a bunch of emergency vehicles. What exactly do you think you're going to do by slowing down and looking other than just possibly causing another accident?
Yeah.
If we need your help, we'll flag you down. Otherwise, the best thing you can do is just move on safely and keep your eyes on the road.
Yeah.
It's never a help when you stop. And now, literally, and we've seen it. We've been to accidents where accidents cars got into accidents, caused accidents just by slowing down. And now we're responding to a second accident a few hundred feet down the road or on the other side of the highway. Zero justification. We beg you, never ever just slow down, just to look, move on. And now, if you're passing an accident that just happened, move past the accident. If you want to help, there's no help out there. Past the accident and then pull over all the way to the right on the shoulder safely. Don't make a short stop in the middle of the highway. You'll have to walk back 100, 200 feet. It's much safer than slamming your brakes and causing another accident. These are cars, trucks coming high speed. And most of the times when there's an accident on the highway, it's not just one car. It's because of the cars that we're following too closely. It ends up being 1, 2, 3, and 4 cars, and sometimes even more. So the best thing you can do, if you see an accident or you're driving up and you feel that you came upon an accident scene that there's no help there yet, pass the accident and pull over all the way to the right. Make sure you exit safely, especially on the high-speed highway, on the 17 or any other highways. And then you walk back and call for help and stay there till help arrives.
And when the help arrives, I would also say that they should probably leave the scene. One of the beautiful things about our community, Yidel, is that everyone helps. And it's a beautiful thing. But once the professionals have arrived, once we arrived on the scene, and your help isn't needed, it's best that you get back in your car and you drive off.
And for two reasons. First of all, curious onlookers or people that are not professionals many times just get in the way. And, emergency vehicles are showing up and coming to the scene, and you're now standing in the way. Your vehicle is blocking.
Yeah. And emergency vehicles
don't have room.
Park a certain way. They're all Hatzalah. Every Hatzalah member has taken classes on how to drive properly and position their vehicles properly. And you can be in the way of that vehicle. So while you've helped, and it's been nice, and it's a beautiful thing that people come out and help.
It's
at
important.
the same time, the best thing they can do once help has arrived is actually to leave.
It's important to stop, make sure help is on the way, wait around till help arrives, and also see if you're needed, perhaps to give a ride, to take a family member to the hospital that might not, have made it to get along, to get a ride along with the ambulance to the hospital, or other passengers in the car that may need a ride. But for that, we don't need 10, 15 cars stopping. The 1 or 2 cars that are needed, I'm sure that's all the members there will ask you and appreciate the help. But all the other cars should really continue on. You stop, you asked, you were told you're not needed. Please, you'll help us by continuing on and allowing for other emergency vehicles to get to the scene, which besides, you're going to get blocked in sometimes for a long time.
Yeah. Talking about the 17, you drive down the 17 eastbound towards the city on a Monday morning or Sunday night, and it's become almost a chil Hashem, frankly, where you have people in the left lane, and sometimes they're doing the speed limit and then trying to, pass to get back into the right lane, but it turns into this little racing game. The left lane is meant to pass. You're supposed to drive in the right lane. It's meant to pass. You have someone slow in front of you. You go to the left lane. You pass them. You go back into the right lane. The left lane isn't pedal to the metal, let me get down to the thruway as quickly as possible. And if someone's in my way, I'm going to get up behind them. I'm going to flash them.
I'm going to make them move.
I'm going to make them move. I'm going to make sure they know. I'm going to make a sharp turn in front of them, cut them off in front. They're all different types of drivers. Maybe people shouldn't be in the left lane who shouldn't be there. It's true. But we as a community can't be in a situation where, and I say this very respectfully, where you look at the left lane and you see what's going on, the tailgating and the speeding, and it happens with everybody. And it's really not appropriate. I'll just say that, and of course it's dangerous,
Exactly.
and
They
there's so
cause
many
accidents happen like that.
every Sunday night, every Monday morning, without fail. There's accidents on the 17th. Yidel, am I right or wrong?
Absolutely.
Is there a weekend that goes by where there's no accident on a Sunday or on a Friday on the way up?
It's usually multiples.
Multiple. Every single week. And this has to stop. This has to stop. Let's put the Chil Hashem aside. Let's be selfish about ourselves.
People are coming up. They want to enjoy a nice weekend, and they're getting stuck. Because
The tailgating and the speeding and getting someone out of the lane because they're a little slow. Maybe they are a little slow. You have to be patient. It is what it is.
I think the message is, give yourself enough time.
Yeah.
Give yourself enough time to get there safely without having to speed, without having to get angry, without having to get into any arguments and potential road rage on the way because someone's not going fast enough. Also account for potential for traffic. There's going to be construction on the 17th. They always say that around the weekends there won't be, but we don't know. But there always seems to be construction on the 17th. It's going to take time to get upstate. Allow yourself some extra time. And if you don't want to sit in traffic, try to leave in times where, traffic is lighter, whether it's early morning or late at night. But make sure you are well rested. Tired driving is a bad recipe. It's a bad mix, and we've unfortunately seen, many of these late night single car accidents are from drivers that got tired and dozed off and fell asleep. If you feel tired along the way, pinching yourself and loud music and opening the windows,
It's not going to work.
it doesn't work. The only thing that works is actually pulling off the highway, finding a safe spot, and take a nap for 15, 20 minutes, get out of the car, walk around, and then move on. If you feel tired, you feel like you have that urge to fall asleep, don't try to push it for another half hour. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of these accidents very close to the bungalows already. The exits 113, 112, 111, even 109, 108. We've seen accidents happen there. Mamish, they were almost at their bungalow, close, a few minutes away. If you're tired, pull over. Find a safe spot, lit spot, and take a short nap. I think our final message is we'd love to be able to spend our summers upstate together with the entire community safely. Us Hatzalah members also want to be able to spend time and enjoy the country without having to run out on too many calls. We know that we're not going to prevent everything. There are medical illnesses. There are accidents that happen, and we
They're
can't
just
say
that,
it's
accidents.
preventable.
Yeah.
And there's hashgacha elyoina, there's hashgacha protis, but we have to do our shtadlus. And if we do, we will definitely have a much better summer season.
Yeah. Have we talked about chronic patients with chronic medical conditions and the capabilities or what they should be?
No, we didn't touch on that really yet.
Someone has significant.
I think we should just keep it simple because we can talk a lot about that. I think we would just say the following. If you have a real complex, complicated medical history and complex medical needs, you should really discuss it with your personal doctor to see if they're okay with you coming up, because in case of emergency, you're not close to your doctor. Hospitals upstate, some of them don't have as many capabilities as the hospitals in the city, and we can't always take you down safely. If someone gets really sick, we can't take you for a 2-hour ride down. If a patient's critical, we're going to have to take you to the local hospital first to stabilize. So it's something to consider. If you do have any medical history, at least bring along any information that you can have, even like a basic cardiogram, a copy of it, so that
List of medications.
if something does happen, your medications, a list of medications, so that if you do need to be taken to a local hospital or when Hatzalah is called and the medics are there, at least you should have enough information for your family member so that we can know how to treat. I think talking about this, there's one other very important topic. Parents send their kids to camps. Everybody wants to have a beautiful, enjoyable summer. And many times we come to camps and we find children that have had a medical episode. And when we ask the camp nurse, the camp mother, or camp staff any medical history, they pull out the chart, the medical chart, the medical history, and perfectly healthy. There's no history whatsoever. And sometimes there are serious conditions that children have and medications that they have, and they're sent up to camp without the staff being told. And it can create a very dangerous situation because they don't always happen Monday afternoon, 9 to 5. They can sometimes happen in the middle of the night. Emergencies happen on Shabbos when parents are not even able to be located. But even if they are, they're not there, they're far away, and the medic now has to make decisions. The medic sometimes might have to treat with some medications that may actually have a contraindication and a bad interaction with any medication that your child might be taking. Or if the camp doesn't know about it, it presents a very dangerous challenge.
What would you say, though, to parents, and we all have children here, you and I, and we love them dearly, but if someone's child has a medical problem and they don't want the camp to know about it, and it's very hurtful to a lot of these parents.
We feel that this is
what would you tell them? What would be their message?
Sure. So I think the message is very, very clear. Camp staff, you trust them with your child's well-being for 8 weeks, for 4 weeks. You trust them with your child's everything. Trust them that they will keep your child's records confidential. They have no interest whatsoever in sharing sensitive information and medical conditions. These are people that you trust with your child's life, with their well-being. They will do the right thing. They'll keep it quiet, and they will only discuss it with appropriate medical professionals when the need arises. Hatzalah members, the first training that a Hatzalah member gets, the first rule is confidentiality.
HIPAA.
HIPAA is a federal set of rules and regulations that protect that. But just for the decency, the first thing we train and teach Hatzalah members is confidentiality, patient confidentiality. They know it, they respect it, and they will never divulge any sensitive medical condition, only when absolutely necessary and just with the people that will be providing the care to your child. So we urge you, if your child has a medical condition, speak to at least one staff member in the camp that you may perhaps feel more comfortable with. Somebody should know. Somebody that you trust should know before you send your child to camp with a medical condition.
And I'll also say to a lot of these parents that a lot of children have problems. A lot of children have medical conditions. It's not abnormal. And if you trust your child, like you said, with the camp, then you should be able to trust them with a medical problem.
Even more so.
It's not so uncommon as you think. People have, unfortunately, nebuch problems. And it's just not worth the risk. We understand how sensitive it is, but it's just not worth the risk. The medic can give a drug, it interacts with another drug the child's taking, and we don't know. And these are things that happen all the time. And the charts, like you said, we get the charts from the camp, and it's empty. There's nothing on there. It's just not worth the risk.
And this is, these can be sometimes life-threatening and life-altering decisions that need to be made in a moment's notice. And if we don't have the information, we can't help, or we can do something that may be potentially hurtful. But the camps, the reason why these camps are in business is to give your child the best, summer possible.
No camp wants to have the reputation that they're sharing information.
That's right. And they do the right thing for these kids, and they will do the right thing for your child. And sometimes even more so. When a kid has, a challenge or something, they might even go out of their way to make him even more comfortable so that he has a truly enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chaim. And let's hope that we can only meet, discussions and talking about things, not having to meet on accidents.
Amen.